Welcome, everybody, to a very special episode of the Monday Night Tours. We are your guides through the journey that is taking us through the Monday Night Wars. I am Josh Kaiser, and I am joined today by Kyle Hoagland. How is it going?
Happy 2018 to you and everybody out in the interwebs and on your, however the hell you're listening to us. Just know that we hope that you guys have an enjoyable 2018.
Yeah, and hopefully you guys enjoyed our reviews of 1995, the Monday Night Wars. We're about 3 months in, Kyle. We've had fun. We started with the debut of Nitro at Mall of America, and we've reviewed every Nitro and Raw that's taken place from then on. And we thought it'd be a fun way to kind of kick off both the 2018 as well as the 1996 edition of the Wars by doing our yearly awards show. Obviously, we're only going to discuss the 3 months of the Monday Night Wars, and keeping in mind that we're really just watching the Wars and the pay-per-views along with it. So anything outside of that, anything that has happened before September, just, pretty much can be ignored. And then going forward, when we do the next year's, awards show, we'll have a full calendar year at that point. But
so before we get flamed on the Twitterverse, just make sure everyone understands that we're talking from the birth of Nitro to the end of 1995. That is where we're basing our awards on, which is why you might be like, well, how come you don't think Diesel's the top wrestler of the year? He had the world title the whole year. Well, it's because we didn't really pay much attention to 3/4 of the whole year. So sorry.
Correct. Absolutely. And I also on top of that, if you guys want to blast us, feel free to go follow us on Twitter or like us on Facebook at Monday Night Tours. Let us know what your awards would have been for these shows, for this period of time. Do you agree? Do you disagree? And if you haven't subscribed to our podcast yet, what are you waiting for? Go subscribe. We're on iTunes. We're on Google Play. You can find us anywhere. Go to MondayNightTours.com. Follow us on all social media, whatever the case may be. Let us know what you think, who your awards are, Kyle. And that said, let's just get into it. You ready to do this?
I think so. I mean, like I said, I see the list. I don't think you and I have a ton of notes, but I think you and I could probably argue most of these to death. So yeah, I'm ready to go.
Oh yeah, this is definitely not a well prepared show by any means. We kind of jotted some things down. We're just gonna roll with it. So, we'll see what happens. And let's kick it off, Kyle, with best debut. Of course, keeping in mind this is the best debut of a wrestler during the Monday Night Wars starting in September. And anyone I don't have here, Kyle, that you want to suggest, feel free to throw in. I've got a couple, added on the list. Lex Luger, of course, big debut for Nitro, Mall of America, first episode, shows up looking fine in his white blouse. Really kind of kicked things off in the right gear for Nitro. Made a big splash right from the beginning. And as you can see, they still not sure what to do with this uncrowned champion as we closed out 95. But Lex Luger with best debut. Another candidate, Medusa. Of course, the infamous return of Alundra Blaze to Nitro almost right at the end of the calendar year. Shows up, has the WWF Women's title in the trash. Drops it into the trash, I should say, and says, now this is where the big girls play. So, big, infamous return for her to Nitro. On the Raw side, of course, we got Goldust, Kyle. Big debut there. He did a lot of vignettes. And ultimately, I think he wrestled Savio Vega in his opening pay-per-view match. And really hasn't done a whole lot, but just now starting to feud with Razor Ramon as we move into the next, into 1996. Ahmed Johnson, of course, he had a couple of vignettes where he sputtered out some one-liners and comments that were incoherent babblings. So, Ahmed Johnson. Then you got Scott Norton. Much like Lex Luger, he debuted at the opening Nitro. Of course, getting into the faces of people wanting to start a fight. Eventually, Macho Man kind of gets in his face. And then lastly, Kyle, Chris Benoit walks out of a limo after being pumped up as wrestlers fought around the world in Japan and all kinds of places. Walks out of a limo, says, "This is where the big boys play." And that was his big debut.
And he was never heard from again.
Yeah, pretty much. Joined the Horsemen at some point, and that was it. What did you think? Is there anyone else, Kyle, on this list, or anything you want to add before we give our picks?
Well, I feel like even Double J, I feel like got a better return. I guess it wouldn't be a debut; it's more like a return. But at the same time, I guess Lex Luger would have been a return since he did wrestle for NWA, WCW before he jumped over to WWF. But I mean, obviously, he made a splash by hitting his gold record over Ahmed Johnson, causing him to be relatively unfazed for a couple of seconds. But as far as this list that was given, I really can't think of anybody off the top of my head. I mean, Mari Jannetty was a decent return. Wouldn't really say a debut. But I think if I'm going to put my vote in, if I'm part of the the Academy the award committee.
Well, I've given that it's you and I'm going to say yes. You're going to have to put your vote in. It's
okay.
Well, really long show of just me.
I think as far as the most impacted debut, I can't argue against Lex Luger. Lex Luger right now, basically just jumped right into where Vader probably left off in WCW. He's definitely a much bigger player. He jumped right into the main event status, as much as it's hard to believe it considering the matches he's been in. But he's basically, since he's been here, has been in the face of whoever's been the world champion since being there. I guess Goldust probably might have been a close second, but as far as a meaningful debut, yeah, his vignettes were cool and different, and definitely one of a kind. I don't think he's made as much of an impact with his debut as Lex Luger. Lex Luger definitely fell into WCW's lap at the right time.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself. Agree completely. Lex Luger gets my vote. So our 1995 award winner for best debut, Lex Luger, the total package.
Don't worry, we'll send all the awards to WCW headquarters. I believe that is probably now a burning pile of rubble in 2018, but hopefully he'll be able to get it. He can sift through the debris.
Maybe we can fax it to him, right?
That would be nice.
So congratulations, Lex Luger. All right, next on the list, Kyle, we got Feud of the Year. This is, of course, not really Feud of the Year. It's Feud of the 3 months from September to the end of the calendar year of 1995. I've got 4 here, Kyle. Feel free to add any others that you'd like to add. The first I have is Bret Hart versus Jerry Lawler. Of course, Bret Hart started out at SummerSlam, which is just before we kind of kicked things off. Had a match with Isaac Yankem, Lawler's evil dentist. And kind of on and off, Bret Hart would have different matches, but Lawler kind of always kept in kind of in the forefront, always adding a feud, kind of throwing Isaac Yankem in there again, always talking smack about Hart's parents, Stu and Helen, and always kind of a diss there. So Bret Hart and Jerry Lawler. Number 2, Kyle. The Giant versus Hulk Hogan. Of course, this was the big one, man versus man, machine versus machine. Hogan threw him off a building and literally killed him. But Giant snapped his neck twice and killed Hogan in return. A lot of things. Hogan kind of wrestled kind of feuded with the entire Dungeon of Doom, but it was led by the Giant. So I'm going to say the Giant versus Hulk Hogan here. Of course, Razor Ramon and 1-2-3 Kid. They started out as friends, started out as tag team partners. Kid got frustrated. They wrestled multiple times. They had a match where I think Kid was pinned 3 or 4 times during the match. And then ultimately Kid would turn heel on Razor Ramon. And it's kind of a feud that's still sort of going on. They had a tag team match at the last In Your House, which Razor Ramon and Marty Jannetty won. But I don't think things are over yet. Kid, of course, selling out to the $1 Million Corporation. So 1-2-3 Kid and Razor Ramon. And lastly, Kyle, but maybe most
Leasley.
The Shark versus Scott Norton. Of course, Scott Norton in his debut match against Macho Man, the Shark came out, interfered, fell on Scott Norton's legs and held him down for an elbow drop. And ref did not DQ that, gave Macho Man the 3 count. And then, of course, 6 weeks later, the Shark and Scott Norton are pushing each other in the locker room. Then they're on the Taboo Tuesday edition of Nitro. They were still pushing each other around in their own locker room, and ultimately they'd settle the score in the ring in about a minute and a half with the Scott Norton victory. Scott Norton versus the Shark, Kyle. Any other big feuds you want to mention here?
There's only one feud on there that even probably comes close, and the only other one that I think would have been second isn't even on this list, and that's Shawn Michaels versus his own mortality.
Or versus Nine Thugs at the Syracuse nightclub.
Tell me about it. That whole thing was a bigger focus was, whether or not Shawn Michaels was able to, fight through his own injuries. Like, that to me was feud of the year. Outside of, honestly, if you're going to break Hulk Hogan's neck twice in the span of 6 weeks, really 3 weeks, then, it's got to be up there for feud of the year. And by feud of the year, I mean feud from September to December. I think that just, falls into the lap of WCW having like a mega heel taking on a mega face. I think they did the best job with it. Bret Hart and Jerry Lawler, I think that they've had a longer standing feud. It didn't ignite the way I think Giant and Hogan did. And also I think Giant and Hogan were the feud. I mean, they were at the time what the world title was all about. Bret Hart was not in the world title contention, and obviously Jerry Lawler is a commentator. So if I'm putting my vote in here, I definitely have to give it to Giant and Hulk Hogan.
Yeah, hands down, Giant and Hogan. They had a feud going on, led to a world title change, whether Giant had it or not. Hogan turned to the dark side. We had a lot of interesting things going on here, and was easily the best feud we saw in the short span. So congratulations to the Giant and Hulk Hogan. Now, next, Kyle, we get Best New Gimmick. And this one's going to be a little bit harder to do because we didn't have a ton of new gimmicks to discuss. The first on this list, Goldust. Obviously a very bizarre gimmick here. This androgynous, character. He's, part of Hollywood. He quotes movies. He's kind of a little out there, a little strange. Number 2 on the list, Kyle, we have the Giant. Obviously, son of Andre, an unstoppable beast, could literally get thrown off a roof and walk right out into the ring minutes later to wrestle a match. He's strong as they come, as big as they come, just a total monster. And then we have Ahmed Johnson. Any other best new gimmicks, Kyle, that you want to mention here?
And we have Ahmed Johnson. So, Kyle, you know what? I tried to think of if there was somebody else that had like a best new gimmick, and I was trying to wonder if Barry Dudinsky was around last year, just to give him some credit. Actually, I think Doc Hendricks has probably a better gimmick than a couple of these guys. I feel like, Ahmed Johnson, you put that in here just for me to laugh.
That was for you and the fans.
Yeah, for sure, because we're all Ahmed heads, as we call ourselves. The Giant, it's hard to say that he has a great gimmick considering it's just son of other gimmick, and that seemed to work. And the whole point of the gimmick was to sell out the pay-per-view and make it seem like, okay, it's Hogan versus the Giant's son. Will the Giant's son Andre the Giant's son get, retribution for his father, or will Hogan literally bury him, under the Pontiac Silverdome brother? And that's really all it really came down to. I don't think it's much of a gimmick. In fact, they really didn't do much with the gimmick. Goldust, I mean, what can you say? It's Goldust. There's no other Goldust. There's no other wrestler that has ever, I think, come close to the persona that is Goldust. He's one of a kind. But I will say, though, it's so much in its infancy that it's hard to say that it's a great gimmick now. We know what Goldust ultimately becomes, and I think that's what weighs my decision to say Goldust. But I think it just has to come down to, honestly, and you're saying best new gimmick. Yes, it has to be Goldust. He's on his way to something special, and it's unlike anything that we've seen before. So, everything else is either, kind of rehashed, or you put it in here for a laugh. So Gold Dust is my choice.
Yeah, I agree. It's got to be Gold Dust. Definitely the best new gimmick. Ahmed Johnson's, we've seen it before in many ways. And the Giant, we've kind of seen before too. So Gold Dust still in its infancy, like you said, but got a lot of time to grow with it. But so far, best new gimmick of September to December. Keep that in mind. It's a 3-month ordeal. So congratulations, Gold Dust. All right, Kyle, now worst new gimmick. We'll start, of course, out with Ahmed Johnson, and then we'll move to Avatar. Of course, if you remember, that was Al Snow coming out without a mask on, and then, of course, he puts the luchador mask on for his match. Then we've got the Yeti in his build-up coming out like the gobbledygooker out of the old frozen Ice Age egg for his grand return, or not return, but debut ultimately at Halloween Havoc, where he would come out and buttfuck Hogan in the ring. And then you got Craig Pittman. Of course, Craig Pittman looking for a manager. This is the hot new storyline as we kind of closed out 1995. And it's a storyline that's building into 1996, Kyle, so something to look forward to there. And then you got Kimberly, who was the Diamond Doll. Now she is the Southern Belle, the Southern Doll. She is Kimberly. Don't know what to make of her. Kyle, any other worst new gimmicks on there, or do you got one of those 5 that you want to pick as your least favorite worst gimmick?
Well, I feel like I still should think that we should put an Isaac Yankem in there, because I think he was new in '95. I don't remember him in '94, if I recall.
His debut might have been SummerSlam, actually, now that you say that, so it fit in here.
Yeah, so I think for the sake of the cartooniness of it, the dude came in every once in a while, not even dressed up like he looked like a dentist. He just came in like track pants and no shirt. So it just felt like most of the time he would just come down to the ring like he was just in sweatpants, and they are billing him as a dentist. And you would think there would be better production value out of him. He came.
His first debut was a vignette in June of '95. So. He didn't debut till SummerSlam, so I'll allow that to be in here.
Right, and I think he also goes in there that his gimmick is shit, and so that's another thing I would say that if you're gonna be if you're gonna be a dentist, be a fucking dentist. You're gonna be an evil dentist, be an evil dentist. I think they showed that off at the very beginning, like in June and July, but I think ever since then, his notorious cage match with Bret Hart, I feel like they have completely just scrapped the fact that he's a dentist. But they still mention he's a dentist, but he doesn't dress up like one. He still has the drill theme song, which is the worst idea ever. And I say all of this and still think maybe I don't know. Now that I'm more I talk about it, I feel like maybe I need to aim more towards. So maybe we'll have a little bit of an argument with this one, because I do. My first thoughts are when I saw this list, I was like, oh god, it's the Yeti for sure, because the Yeti was supposed to be this big debut. Once again, that's the reason why it's not up on there as best debuts. And the gimmick is terrible because it's terrible. It's not even a Yeti. The Yeti is supposed to be like the abominable snowman.
Mummy.
It's a mummy. And then to make it worse was they tried as hard as they could to make it seem like, oh my god, the Yeti,
They shoehorned it out of nowhere a week before the pay-per-view, 6 days before the pay-per-view. All of a sudden there's a frozen block of ice. He gets zapped by lightning and it opens up and the ice melts, and there's the Yeti. And then he comes out on Sunday and butt fucks Hogan in the ring. I mean, ultimately that's what happens.
Yeah, and so maybe because of the fact that it was part of the world title picture I had.
Can I add on top of that? When he shows up again, it's not until World War III, and he's dressed like a ninja.
But was he still called the Yeti, though?
Yes, they call him the Yeti.
They called him the Yeti?
Yes.
So I almost want to give this to the Yeti, but because the Yeti was so bad that they basically scrapped it immediately. I mean, he was not heard from again until World War III. That he was not on any type of television at all. I think they knew that they screwed up and they just tried to bury it. Obviously, they put him in for World War III because everybody is in World War III, including the shit talent. I almost want to. I kind of want to give this to DDS only because they kept on pushing this like he was going to be some menacing bad guy that really, I mean, he wasn't ready. I forgot what Kane's real name is, but the man
Glenn Jacobs.
Glenn Jacobs, a man who would sooner or later become a guy who is now, I think, is a first ballot Hall of Famer in Kane. He was not there in 95, and this gimmick gave him no favors. So actually, my vote goes to DDS.
Well, I wish we had a third party here, Kyle, because I'm going to go the Yeti, and I just think that for all the reasons we already said. So we'll have to let the fans maybe give us their final input, but we'll say we'll let this happen as a tie. Congrats to the Yeti and Isaac Yankem DDS for the worst gimmicks of 1995. Now, as we move on, we'll go to the best manager, Kyle. Best manager of 95. And we've got, of course, Jim Cornette. He represented Yokozuna, represents Owen Hart. He fought for British Bulldog to get the world title match at In Your House 5, going on the basis that Bret Hart, when Bret Hart was declared to, or how was it again? He was supposed to, he won the match technically, but he didn't get his world title match. They fought for it, got him his world title match with the help of Clarence Mason. So Jim Cornette, of course, big manager here in WWF.
And Diana Smith couldn't have been more elated.
Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Corporation, he's signing talent left and right. Of course, he had Kama, and now he's got 1, 2, 3 Kid. He's got good old Cycle Sid.
And Santa Claus.
Yeah, he does have Santa Claus and a potential $1 Million champion on the horizon, Ted DiBiase. Then we got Jimmy Hart, Kyle. Of course, he represented Hogan early on in our time reviewing this, eventually turns his back on Hulkamania, and now he represents the Giant and Lex Luger. I don't know if I'll necessarily put him as the representative for the Dungeon of Doom, but more so just the Giant and Lex. That said, Kevin Sullivan, Kyle, the Taskmaster representing the Dungeon of Doom. That means Ming. That means the Shark. That means the Giant. Who else is in the Dungeon of Doom? Oh, Zodiac.
I think Kamala.
Kamala was there for a hot second.
Hugh Morris.
Yeah, Hugh Morris. So a lot of representatives in the Dungeon of Doom, head by the Taskmaster Kevin Sullivan, Kyle. And finally, Paul Bearer, of course, representing the Undertaker with that iconic voice. Anybody else you want to list here, Kyle? Any of the females, Kimberly, or I should say the Doll, or Sister Sherry, or anybody else that you want to mention as a best manager? And then who's your pick?
I don't think there's anybody on that we haven't mentioned that I wouldn't put in the contention. So for that, I feel like no. This is probably about as good of a list as I can think of, and there's really only 2 on this list that I think could be put in. As much as I love myself some Ted DiBiase, when you really look at what the success of the wrestlers of Ted DiBiase, there really isn't
hasn't been
much.
Doing well.
No. Other than a kind of like a double cross by 1, 2, 3 Kid on Razor Ramon to give Cycle Sid the victory. That was pretty much Ted DiBiase's claim to fame. The only thing that he had of power was the urn, and he ended up losing it by Kamala being defeated. Like I said, as much as I love the $1 Million Man, this was not a great year if you look at the stats. I mean, He'll tell you otherwise. So really the 2 that are on my list that I think is time to talk about and kind of debate would be Jim Cornette and Jimmy Hart.
I agree.
So the two Jimmys.
Definitely the Jims here,
So now we're talking about between Jim Cornette, who I think overall has probably done the most to get his guys over. And I think that is the most important thing that a manager does. And I think Jim Cornette actually does this better than anybody else so far in the, once again, 3.5 months or whatever it is that we've been going through. Jim Cornette has gotten an Intercontinental title match with this guy, a world title match. His
clients are always wrestling in title matches, one way or another. He seems to
his clients were tag champions with Yoko and Owen. So right now of the people we're talking about, the only ones that have legitimate gold around their waist or with Yoko over his shoulder is Jim Cornette. So Jim Cornette is got.
In fairness, Jimmy Hart did turn his back on Hulkamania, Kyle. So he did turn his back on the client, but he had a stipulation put in there that cost Hogan the title in favor of the Giant until management stepped in. So if he was representing the Giant at the time, which you think he was underhandedly, he did help he helped manipulate contracts to give the Giant a world title. So
that is true, even though it was stolen. And also, you got to think to yourself, when we first were discussing Jimmy Hart was not a best manager contender until after he turned on Hulkamania.
Correct.
So I really don't give Jimmy Hart the credit that he did manage the world champion in Hogan.
And he's got a lot. Lex Luger's been in multiple world title matches now. I mean, he does represent.
But unfortunately, Jimmy Hart has been the strongest part of that duo. And really, that should not be the case. You should have your wrestler speaking loud in the ring, and you've got the mouth of the South speaking everywhere else. Lex Luger has not looked strong in his matches, and it's been up to Jimmy Hart in some of them to help him win fights against people that, honestly, Lex Luger should have beaten, single-handedly without having to worry about Jimmy Hart. We're talking Jim Duggan, each of the American males. So to me, Jimmy Hart has definitely, I think, maybe gone above and beyond to help seal victories, but I feel like those are hollow victories. Jim Cornette has managed and helped escalate his wrestlers to multiple title matches, as well as also managing the tag champions themselves. So my vote right now, gun to my head, I give it to the tennis racket wielding James E. Cornette.
I agree with you. Ultimately, he does represent his clients the best, and he hired the abilities and the services of one Clarence Mason, who might be one of the best kayfabe lawyers there are. So
agreed.
I gotta give him props. So Jim Cornette, congratulations on Best Manager of 1995.
And who would have thought that afterwards we would have Clarence Mason coming back just 15 years later as David Otunga. So it's good to know that he went to the weight room and became a wrestler later.
Now, Kyle, all that said, worst managers of the year. My nominees, Kyle, for worst manager, Mr. Fuji. Other than occasionally coming out with Yokozuna when he remembers and waving a Japanese flag, what else has the man done? And then we got Sunny. She, of course, represents Skip Donna right now. And she's, to your point, she's the best part of Skip Donna by her yelling and screaming and stuff, but she hasn't done much to help him. The dude has been jobbing to Barry Horowitz left and right, so not a good look for her or her client. We got Colonel Parker. His claim to fame is ultimately turning on Bunkhouse Buck and Dirty Dick Slater, costing them the tag team titles to the Harlem Heat, as he's infatuated with the last person on our list, Sister Sherry Kyle, who has done nothing but cost the Harlem Heat actually those same tag team titles to the American males, and now she's running off with Colonel Parker. The two of them could almost be a co-winner here for worst managers. Those are my 4 suggestions. Anybody that you disagree with, agree with, want to add to that list, and then ultimately, who is your worst manager?
The person who I think is the worst manager isn't even on this list, and the reason why I do that is because you wouldn't even call this person a manager. She's a valet. She does nothing to help her client, and that is the Diamond Doll, a.k.a. Kimberly. I think that overall she's airheaded. She has no idea what she's doing out there. She is there as eye candy. At least Mr. Fuji has a reputation of being, he could be underhanded outside the ring. He does know how to play, how to be cheap. Sunny obviously, is a mouthpiece. She does yell. She does, try to distract and do what she can to help. Unfortunately, Chris Candido, who just can't buy a win in the WWF. Colonel Parker at least managed the tag champions at one time, and it was also instrumental in the Harlem Heat losing the tag titles to the American males. And then you have Sister Sherry, who once again I kind of throw up there kind of close to Diamond Doll, aka Kimberly, where she has been absent-minded to the point where she has costed her guys the tag titles. So we're talking about two ladies that, because of their either their airheadedness or being distracted by other things, aka the sexy Colonel Parker, they actually costed gold with their clients. So, and you can't say that with Mr. Fuji and Sunny. So it really, if I'm going to think really hard about this, who deserves to be fired from their, I think, and once again, it's hard to say fired because she already left to go to Johnny B. Bad. But right now, I think Kimberly has given the least amount of effort in actually making their client look good. So my vote is actually Kimberly, aka Diamond Doll.
I can give you Kimberly on that one, the Diamond Doll. But I think she was ultimately she's done some things here and there, has helped her clients, whether inadvertently or not. For me, I'm still going Mr. Fuji. I don't think the dude has done anything other than standing there and making an appearance. I think he's been totally worthless. I think Cornette carries that managerial team of Yoko and Owen. And outside of that, who's Fuji representing other than Yokozuna? I don't think anyone. So I think he needs some more clients and needs to pick up his game in 96, Kyle, because for me, it's Mr. Fuji. So that's going to be a split for us. So the fans will have to ultimately decide that one. But for now, we'll call it a worst manager of Mr. Fuji and the Diamond Doll Kimberly. Congratulations on worst managers of 1995. Now, Kyle, we've pretty much a quick one here for best and worst stable. Stables aren't huge at this point, but they are a part of wrestling. And ultimately, we've got the $1 Million Corporation, we've got the Four Horsemen, and we got the Dungeon of Doom. Is there any other stables you can think of before we discuss which one we think is the best and the worst?
I mean, at some point, you almost would consider Hulkamania as being a stable. Because they had like once again, it's more of a guns for hire thing, and they kind of like banded together for one purpose.
I think it's just that's all it could be. I don't think I can totally count it as a stable, but I know what you mean.
How about the Japanese Inquisition or whatever the heck they called that stuff? No, I think if we're actually going to be serious about it, I think these really are the four only groups, because you kind of think of it, you got. I mean, the Four Horsemen are a legendary stable. Probably they are the pioneers as far as having a group of talent that kind of paves the way. Money Incorporated with probably the best manager of the group that has, as far as speaking, as much as I do enjoy Jimmy Hart, I think Ted DiBiase carries the stable well. And once again, Jimmy Hart really isn't the manager of the Dungeon of Doom. So now you're talking Kevin Sullivan, and I think Kevin Sullivan half the time is on the floor having seizures, acting out something. I have no idea. So if we're going to go best and worst out of the three on the list, because I really can't think of another stable that we could call a stable and feel proud to use that word. It's an
early era, yeah.
Right. I go Four Horsemen. But then again, God, this is so rough. Dungeon of Doom, I think I have to go with Dungeon of Doom, and the only reason why I say that is because they were probably the only stable that I think you and I both agreed definitely had a decent head of steam before it just
they did
cut off.
Right.
It just cut off completely. So, I mean, the Dungeon of Doom obviously is still around, but in a sense of it's really just the giant along with cronies. The Four Horsemen now are kind of showing back up into the forefront, even though we're still not sure who that Fourth Horseman. Yeah, at least
three of them and Randy Anderson.
Exactly. I feel like, but then again, I can't say that Money Incorporated is the worst stable, because I feel like they are showcased decently enough.
Right.
So if I'm gonna vote best, I say Dungeon of Doom. What's your thoughts on at least that vote?
I agree. Dungeon of Doom the best, and I don't think it's close there.
So, all right. So if we're going to agree with that, so then let's talk about the worst. Because I think the worst stable, it's interesting. Because obviously when you look at the talent and the people who are in it, the Four Horsemen are the Four Horsemen. I mean, we know what they're capable of doing. But I do feel like it's a little bit of...
But I don't think they've done it at this point.
Yeah,
and you haven't seen all four of them together, working together, doing anything. It's kind of been Flair. It was like Arn Anderson and Pillman for a minute. Then Flair kind of joined them. They turned on Sting. They were hot for a second, and then they kind of faded again. I think now,
the
Kyle,
Four Horsemen are all over the place.
I think if it was any other name, if I just called them the Three Amigos or Flair's guys or something like that, like I think they would be. I think they're the worst. I think it's the name of the Four Horsemen what's blinding you to choosing them right now.
And I can agree with that. It's sloppy right now what the Four Horsemen are doing or what they're trying to do with them. I'm sure maybe if you give it a little bit longer, maybe they'll solidify what they're trying to do. Money Incorporated is Money Incorporated. The train will just keep on moving. So they're not. There's nothing bad about them. There's nothing great about them, but they're much more of a stable unit and something that's much more showcased as a stable than the Four Horsemen. So I do agree with that. As far as what we're going to say is a stable, I think the Four Horsemen represent those aspects the least right now.
Yeah, so let's just say it. The Four Horsemen, worst stable of 95, and the Dungeon Doom, the best stable. Congratulations to both of you.
I'll say, yeah, no pitchforks on that one. Make sure you guys actually listen to what we said before you guys crucify us on the internet.
That said, Kyle, now we're going to move to best and worst pay-per-views. I'm going to kind of go through the cards for all 8 of these, Kyle, because these are the 8 pay-per-views we had. I'm going to quickly run through them, and then just kind of keep a mental note. Which one do you think was your favorite? Which ones was your not your favorite? Because I sort of just jot them down here, but I don't know what's actually considered the best or the worst. We'll go with Halloween Havoc 95 first, Kyle. I'm skipping dark matches. I'm going to go straight to what was actually on the card. Johnny B. Bad defeated Diamond Dallas Page, who, of course, at the time had the Diamond Doll and Max Muscle. That won him the WCW World Television Championship. Randy Savage, of course, defeated the Zodiac. If you recall, Kyle, Randy Savage had to defeat the Zodiac, and Luger would later defeat Ming by disqualification. And once they defeated both of those, they were able to have a match against each other, which, of course, Randy Savage would go on to beat Luger. You also had Kurosawa with Colonel Robert Parker. He defeated Road Warrior Hawk. You had Sabu, who was joined by the Sheik, defeating Mr. JL. You had Sting and Ric Flair defeated Brian Pillman and Arn Anderson by disqualification. That actually turned out to be Sting won the match because Flair turned and recreated the Four Horsemen on Sting. And then Hogan ultimately defeated the Giant in a monster truck match. And then the Giant would actually go on to defeat Hogan by disqualification because of the Jimmy Hart interference. So ultimately, Kyle, that was the Big Man vs. Machine. That's your Halloween Havoc card. Survivor Series 95, you got 1-2-3 Kid, Dr. Tom Pritchard, Rad Radford, and Skip Donna. Of course, that was Teddy DiBiase buying 1-2-3 Kid's spot into that match. They defeated Barry Horowitz, Bob Holly, Hakushi, and Marty Jannetty. That, I believe, 1-2-3 Kid was the sole survivor of. You had Aja Kong, Bertha Faye, Linus Asuka, and Tomoko Watanabe defeating Alundra Blaze, Chaparita Asari, Kyoko Inoue, and Saki Hasagawa.
Very well done.
Thanks. You had Goldust defeating Bam Bam Bigelow. You had the Dark Side, which was Undertaker, Savio Vega, Henry O. Godwin, and Fatu, defeating the Royals of Triple H, Izzy Yankem, Lawler, and Mabel. And then you had Ahmed Johnson in his debut match with Shawn Michaels, British Bulldog, and Psycho Sid, defeating Dean Douglas.
Whoa. Who?
Psycho Sid.
Thank you.
Defeating Dean Douglas, Owen Hart, Razor Ramon, and Yokozuna. And then ultimately, Bret Hart would win the World Championship, defeating Diesel. So that is your Survivor Series 95. In your House 4, you had Hunter Hearst Helmsley defeating Fatu. You had the Smoking Guns defeating 1-2-3 Kid and Razor Ramon defending their tag titles. Goldust defeated Marty Jannetty. You had King Mabel and Yokozuna ending in a double countout. They hugged afterwards because they were, vicious heels, still friends. Razor Ramon defeated Dean Douglas after Dean Douglas was given the Intercontinental title for a hot second when Michaels had to forfeit it. You had British Bulldog defeating Diesel in his world title match by disqualification. This is the match I was referring to that Cornette, got him a rematch for down the line. That was in your House 4. Starrcade 95, Kyle. This, of course, is the match. If you guys had just keeping up with us, we had just basically did the go-home show last week, and this is the pay-per-view to follow. So we're actually going to be reviewing the Nitro following this one. You had, in the World Cup matches, you had Jushin Thunder Liger defeating Chris Benoit. You had Koji Kanemoto defeating Alex Wright. Then Lex Luger defeated Masahiro Chono. You had Johnny B. Bad defeating Masa Saito by disqualification after Saito threw him over the top rope. So that rule is still in place. Yes.
Okay.
You had Shinjiro Otani defeating Eddie Guerrero. And then you had Randy Savage defeating Hiroyoshi Tenzan. and then Sting ultimately defeating Kensuke Sasaki to win the World Cup for the United States. And then in the triangle match, Ric Flair will defeat Lex Luger and Sting, and then Ric Flair would go on to beat Randy Savage and become the world champion. And I know I said I wasn't going to talk about dark matches, but I just thought it would be worth noting that One Man Gang would beat Kensuke Sasaki in a dark match to win the United States Championship. So One Man Gang is your United States champion, Kyle. Someone we have not even seen except in World War III.
And I think WrestleMania 3.
Fall Brawl, Kyle. We had Johnny B. Bad defeating Brian Pillman.
Are we going to the worst ones now? Or
I'm just reading all of them.
Okay, I gotcha.
Brian Pillman would lose to Johnny B. Bad, so Johnny B. Bad becomes the number one contender for the United States Championship. Would later no-show, that leads to his feud with Diamond Dallas Page. Craig Pittman would defeat Cobra. DDP would defeat the Renegade for the defending, or to actually win the World Television title. Harlem Heat would defeat Bunkhouse Buck and Dick Slater for the tag titles. Arn Anderson would beat Ric Flair. And, of course, the War Games match where Team Hulkamania would beat the Dungeon of Doom, and then the Giant would show up and break Hogan's neck. We got In Your House 5. Jannetty and Razor Ramon would defeat 1-2-3 Kid and Cycle Sid. Ahmed Johnson defeats Buddy Landell. Hunter Hearst Helmsley defeats Henry O. Godwin in the Arkansas Hogpen match. Owen Hart defeats Diesel by disqualification. The Undertaker would defeat King Mabel. Bret Hart would defeat the British Bulldog to retain his world title match. That is In Your House 5. In Your House 3, Cycle Sid defeats Henry O. Godwin. Savio Vega defeats Waylon Mercy. British Bulldog defeats Bam Bam Bigelow. Dean Douglas would defeat Razor Ramon. Bret Hart would defeat Jean-Pierre Lafitte. Diesel, Shawn Michaels, and Shawn Michaels would defeat the British Bulldog and Yokozuna, who, of course, that was the tag team, all the titles on the line, and Owen Hart was supposed to be in the match, and British Bulldog replaced him, that whole ordeal. And that is your card for In Your House 3. And then World War 3, Kyle, Johnny B. Bad would defeat Diamond Dallas Page. Big Bubba Rogers would defeat Jim Duggan in a tape fist match. Bull Nakano and Hikiro Hokkaido would defeat Mayumi Ozaki and Cutie Suzuki in a tag team match. Ken Suzuki Sasaki would defeat Chris Benoit to retain his United States title. Luger would defeat Savage. Sting would defeat Flair. And Savage, of course, wins by eliminating One Man Gang to win the World War III and the world title. Whew. Those are the 8 pay-per-views.
Take a deep breath, my friend.
We ran through them all. Any of those stick out for you as the best? Let's go there first.
So there's a couple on here that I feel like they could have been great if it wasn't screwed up. Halloween Havoc was probably actually on its way to being probably pay-per-view of the year if it wasn't for the Yeti debacle. Once again, if you took away from that, I think this was on its way to being one of the, as far as how well it was promoted.
Yeah, initially I think it was, from promotion standpoint and from a pay-per-view standpoint, I think it's my favorite, just off the top of my head.
Yeah, if I'm looking at it from the other perspective, so I'm thinking of the other matches here. Obviously, Starrcade, I can't really. I think the easiest thing to do is let's knock some out that we think are not best.
I would knock every In Your House off. I don't think there's an In Your House that would make the best pay-per-view for me.
Well, I feel like 2 of the In Your Houses had British Bulldog as the main event, so yeah, we'll take that off. Survivor Series was once again Bret Hart beating Diesel, and really all the Survivor Series matches were more,
they were.
they were what they were.
Yeah, they weren't anything to write home about.
Okay, so let's knock out Survivor Series.
Yeah.
So really, what we're talking about here is really all of the WCW pay-per-views. Sadly,
right.
So if I'm going to go with for shock value or something that I'm like, wow, that was kind of crazy. World War III, when I look back at it, with Macho winning the world title was very shocking. I didn't see that coming. That was something that he was legitimately injured, and all of a sudden they just put the belt on him. And then not only did they not let him take some time off, the guy ends up wrestling like a match every day from then on.
Right.
If I really had to go and really look at this from beginning to end. And maybe you can talk me out of it, but maybe Halloween Havoc still does as bad as and unforgiving as the Yeti was. But I think from top to bottom, Halloween Havoc probably seems like it would be the best pay-per-view.
I think it is, and you got the Jimmy Hart swerve, joining that. You got the the monster truck for whatever it was. They tried something different. They tried something new.
It's also the Lex Luger swerve too.
Yeah, exactly. You had the Luger swerve. You had some pretty solid matches throughout. Johnny B. Bad and Diamond Dallas Page was a great opening. You had Sting settling differences between Macho and Luger by having them beat other opponents, and then if they won, they had the match against each other. So stipulations like that, Kyle, I don't know how you cannot pick that as your favorite pay-per-view.
I mean, was there any other one that you thought like maybe could have rivaled?
No, I don't think so. I think that was top for me, and I think that's going to stay as the best pay-per-view.
Because once again, I think we're talking Fall Brawl and World War III are very gimmicky.
Right.
Halloween Havoc is more of you're going to have your classic matches, and it also seems like this was the opportunity to either start brand new storylines or end old ones. Whereas World War III and Fall Brawl always seem like these are resets. So
right.
For that, I guess I got to give Halloween Havoc. Like I said, if you were to just take away the Yeti completely, you're talking this could have easily been a pay-per-view of the year for the whole entire year of '95.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's definitely the most remembered of '95, and that includes the Yeti.
Yeah, so let's give it Halloween Havoc 1995 pay-per-view of the year, or at least September through December. Now for worst pay-per-view, Kyle, I guess we'll remove Havoc. We'll remove World War III because that was one of the ones you had almost picked for it. And I think we'll leave Fall Brawl up as the only option for the WCW ones. But I think ultimately I'm going to take Survivor Series out of there. It was okay. I think it's got to be one of the In Your Houses, Kyle. And I think for me it's going to be In Your House 3. This had the whole champions were going to be in the main event. All the titles on the line. I forget what the gimmicky title they had for that was, but this was supposed to be the big main event, and they don't even have Owen Hart there. And then Owen Hart comes in at the end. They were selling a T-shirt with Owen Hart's face on it. It was all bullshit there. Bret Hart and Jean-Pierre Lafitte, they had a much better match on Raw than they even had on here, and then. You got Bulldog and Bam Bam. You got Sid and Henry O'Godwin and Savio Vega and Waylon Mercier opening your show. This was just a bad card for me, Kyle. This is In Your House 3 is my pick for worst pay-per-view.
I feel like if Waylon Mercier is trying to sell pay-per-view orders, you're already in the wrong place. And I almost wanted to vote Waylon Mercy for worst gimmick, but then he doesn't have a gimmick, so it's hard to give him any award.
Right, and he was barely there for our time watching. We haven't seen much of him.
Well, his gimmick was there's Waylon Mercy watching from the crowd.
Match. Yeah,
he's so bad he's not even allowed in the back. He actually has to pay a ticket to watch the show. Yeah, I would have to agree. Waylon Mercy being in the show, the main event, which could have had a lot of ramifications. It really could have changed the landscape, but instead nothing happened at all. Like, three titles were on the line, but when all was said and done, thanks to Clarence Mason, no titles moved at all. So it was like you might as well have just, and then not to mention, like you said, they're selling merchandise for a match that had no... It didn't affect anything with the WWF. So yes, I agree. I think In Your House 3 had probably the worst talent, as well as the honestly, I mean, the tag match I'm sure was fine, but it was just the ending, the ramifications, what ultimately ended up on the next Raw. It was just a shame that they did nothing with this stipulation.
All right, so In Your House 3, congratulations, worst pay-per-view of 1995. And then, Kyle, we're going to go on to Surprise of the Year. And there's one nominee, and I don't think it's going to come close. It could be Surprise of the entire Monday Night Tours when we're done, Kyle. And that's Alex Wright won a match with the backslide.
I've never seen it before in my life. I'm so happy that we started this podcast, because I would have never known about this nugget of knowledge if we didn't start this podcast. Yeah, I don't care. People on Twitter or Facebook or whatever, you guys can argue whatever you want. This wins 5 awards for me.
Hands down, Alex Wright wins with the backslide. Congratulations, Alex Wright, Surprise of the Year with the backslide. Then, Kyle, we got the Mongo McMichaels quote of the year. I didn't even write a list because I think this is another one that I absolutely loved, and that was when they were having a match, and there was a lot of 2 counts, and he says, "There's more 2 counts than at a twin convention," and I just loved that. I thought it was both clever and awful at the same time, and that's my favorite Mongo quote. If you have another one, feel free to bring it up now.
I mean, all of them are terrible. I mean, I mean amazing from a Mongo quote perspective. This obviously was a really good one. I did like the back and forth between him and Heenan talking about Reggie White and him like playing fair, even though they're both on the defensive side of the ball. Like,
Right.
It just didn't make any sense. I did like the as my friend from Alabama would say, and then just gave some like regular cliche that was made years and years and years ago, and Heenan called him out on it. But yeah, if we're talking about something that really made your head scratch, I mean, I can't argue against the 2 counts, more 2 counts than at a twin convention. So yeah, I'll definitely I'll side to that.
Congratulations, Mongo. You were going to win the award regardless, but that's the quote that's going to get it done. Now, Kyle, on to the last 4 segments: worst, best matches of the year, and worst and best wrestlers of the year. And I kind of went through all of our notes briefly, trying to find our star ratings. So I kind of went with the ones that were 1 star or lower, where we both kind of agreed. And I pulled these 4 out for multiple things. The first, Kyle, I have, now I'm looking at it, for some reason I think I have the one written here wrong.
I would say, when did Jimmy Hart have a match?
Yeah, that's the one I'm looking at. I got to pull that one up while we're sitting here talking. But the first one, Sting versus the Shark for the WCW United States title. This was October 9th.
I think you were talking Luger versus Duggan.
Yes, I think it is Luger versus Duggan, actually, now that you mention it. I'm pulling it up as we're talking here, and it was Luger versus Duggan. Yeah, I think I was writing Jim Duggan, and I wrote Jimmy Hart thinking about him. So, Sting versus Shark. I want to caveat here. I did not put squash matches on here because I don't think that's fair. Obviously, squash matches are there to.
If you're going to count squash matches, it would have been Ahmed Johnson versus X, Y, Z,
Right.
and Z2. So yeah, I appreciate that.
So Sting vs. Shark, WCW United States title match. I think it lasted about a minute, Kyle. Sting obviously does squash the Shark, but it was sloppy and not good.
He also didn't have the title on with him.
He didn't. Yeah, that's another great point. Then we had Bret Hart versus Isaac Yankem. They're trying to finally settle this feud that had been going on since SummerSlam. They had the steel cage match. Of course, Lawler was in the shark cage eventually after he steals some keys, and eventually he's tossing the keys down in the ring. It was slow. It was sloppy. It was all over the place. It just felt completely bizarre. Just a
and
bad
Goldust
match.
wasn't even there.
That's right. Then we just got a standard match, the Taskmaster versus the Renegade. Of course, the Warrior ripoff. This was an awful match. It was kind of a squash on the Renegade, and it ultimately led to Jimmy Hart burying the Renegade both as a performer and a person, and pretty much ended his basically his run, what little run he had in WCW. And then, Kyle, we had Lex Luger versus Jim Duggan. Of course, Luger trying to get pushed as a mega monster, and he basically jobs to Duggan the entire match. It ends with him getting Duggan getting pushed into a 2x4 that Hart had right in front of the ref. The ref doesn't do anything. It leads to the torture rack. What's your pick here is worst match, Kyle?
I think it's not even close. The only match on here that made me like physically ill and angry was Bret Hart Isaac Yankem, and I only say that because they were given, I think, almost 15 minutes of our time, and I want that time back. It was a slow as hell match. They really didn't use the cage to their advantage. The whole gimmick with Lawler was distracting. The whole dropping the keys down and then Bret Hart just throwing the keys out anyways and then climbing out of the ring. It just, none of it made sense. It was dumb. And I think I speak for both of us and say that they could have done so much more with this match, and it was a complete dud.
Agree completely. Don't want to add any more to it. Could have been a lot better, and it just wasn't. So congratulations, Bret Hart. Who would have thought Bret Hart, Kyle, wins our worst match of the year for his October 16th, 1995 steel cage match with Isaac Yankem. Then, Kyle, we got match of the year, and I picked 4 out. I went through and tried to find our highest star ratings. First one I'm going to list, though, Kyle, Cutie Suzuki and Mayumi Ozaki versus Bull Nakano and Akira Hokuto. This was November 27th, 1995. This is the WCW Nitro women's tag team match. We gave it 2.5 and 2.75 stars, respectively. Which is a little bit low for what I was picking here, but I thought this both surprised us and was a very entertaining tag team match, and I think that star rating for women's wrestling in 1995 was worth mentioning, so it should at least be a nominee. Whether it wins or not is another story, but I thought it's worth mentioning. Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit, they had a few matches, Kyle, we were blessed to watch, but the October 16th, 1995 edition, we both gave 3 stars. We were really impressed with the match, and it's what you'd expect from 2 superstars like Eddie and Chris. There's a 6-man tag match on Raw, Kyle, with Yokozuna, Owen Hart, and British Bulldog versus Shawn Michaels, Diesel, and Undertaker from October 9th, 95. I gave it 3 stars. You gave it 3.25. We thought it was one of the best 6-man tag matches we're going to see for the year and probably going forward for a while. And, I mean, just listen to that. Michaels, Nash, Taker, Owen, and even to a lesser extent Yokozuna and, even British Bulldog. A lot of talent in that match, and they pulled it off well. And then the surprise Jean-Pierre Lafitte had a rematch with Bret Hart. Of course, at In Your House, I bashed that match earlier. They had a hell of a match on Raw. 3.5 stars from both of us, Kyle. It may have been the highest rated from both of us, just from a star rating throughout the year. What do you think? What's your match of the year out of these 4 candidates, or is there a 5th that I have not mentioned that you want to bring up?
No, I don't. My match of the year is one of these 4. As much as I would love to give it to either Eddie or Benoit or the 6-man tag, I think the reason why we gave them high stars is because we expected them to have a pretty good match. And I think we rewarded them with a decent rating because they did give a good match. The 3.5 stars that you and I gave to Bret Hart and Jean-Pierre Lafitte, and once again, I'm not dogging Bret Hart. We know what he's capable of doing. Jean-Pierre Lafitte is where we were just completely blown away. He kept at the pace with Bret Hart. He looked like a wrecking ball, and I think that's also the name of his finishing move, if I recall.
I think it's Cannonball, actually.
Cannonball, maybe. Well, it probably makes more sense.
He is a pirate, and he only can see out of one eye, so keep that in mind.
And that isn't kayfabe. That is legit. So I have to give it to Bret Hart, Jean-Pierre Lafitte, because I think we were going into that match going, because you already saw the match. You and I both saw the match at the pay-per-view and thought that, oh God, like, if that was what the pay-per-view match was, what's the Raw one going to be like? But they gave them the right amount of time to go through an entire match, and ultimately Bret Hart won, but Jean-Pierre Lafitte looked very, very good in this match, and I think it surprised both of us, and that's why we gave such a high star rating to those guys. So we'll see plenty of matches where Eddie and Benoit are going to have great matches, and you're going to see HBK, Diesel, and Undertaker, maybe not in a 6-man tag, but they're obviously going to have matches. This is the only time where Jean-Pierre Lafitte is going to be in any type of conversation for an award. So I got to give it to him. So Bret Hart and Jean-Pierre for me.
I agree. I love this match. I think it was easily the best match we have seen, and Bret Hart, we may have picked you having the worst match of the year with Isaac Yankem. Glenn Jacobs, further go on to be known as Kane. Who would have thought they'd have an awful steel cage match in 95? But Bret Hart and Jean-Pierre Lafitte stealing the show, 3.5 stars. Match of the year, or at least the 3 months that we watched Nitro and Raw. Congratulations for our match of the year from the Monday Night Tours. Now, Kyle, as we get ready to close out the show, we got worst and best wrestlers of the year. Worst wrestler of the year, we got a handful on here. I'm going to put the immortal Hulk Hogan on that list because he's not the greatest in-ring talent, but he should be mentioned here. You got Isaac Yankem, already in the worst match of the year, Kyle. You had him as the worst gimmick of the year. Is he also the worst wrestler of the year? Worth a discussion there. Of course, we got the spark plug Bob Holly, jobbing left and right, including to Buddy Landel, who jobbed to a 30-second match the night before against Ahmed Johnson. We got Skip Donna jobbing to Barry Horowitz, Mr. Jobber himself. Skip Donna. You got the Shark Kyle and his hot feud with Scott Norton. We got both of them on this list. A lot of jobbers on here, some big names. And ultimately, for me, Kyle, I'm going to go with Ahmed Johnson as the worst wrestler of the year. And I don't think
he wasn't even on the list.
He didn't have to be, Kyle. Ahmed Johnson. He's on a hot streak. He has won every match he's been in. He looks like shit in every one of them. Ahmed Johnson, worst wrestler of the year for me. What about you?
I think it's too early to call him worst wrestler. Once again, he's won every match he's been in. He's won it easily. I don't think as obviously not good that he is. I don't think he's been totally exposed yet for how bad he is. He hasn't been in the ring with anybody of note where he could bury himself yet. And that is why I say Isaac Yankem. He has been in high profile matches. His gimmick is shit. All of his matches are shit. He is on here for the worst match of the year with Bret Hart. Bret Hart couldn't even save that match. And then you also put down the fact that he is a sweatpants wearing dentist, that they basically just dropped that gimmick, even though that is his gimmick. And the whole point of the 90s wrestling is the gimmick, and it was terrible. For me, it has to be Isaac Yankem. I think you really gotta calm down on Ahmed Johnson. Give him a little bit longer before we find out how shitty he is. Because right now, at least he has a better winning percentage than Yankem, and Yankem has looked bad in his wins too.
Actually, you swayed me, Kyle. I'll give Ahmed Johnson a chance. He can win Worst Wrestler of 1996.
There you go.
1995, we'll give it to Isaac Yankem. Isaac Yankem, Worst Wrestler of 1995. And lastly, Kyle, Wrestler of the Year. We've got a whole list of people. Bret Hart. It could be the Hulk Hogan. It could be Macho Man Randy Savage. You've got Sting. You've got Razor Ramon. Undertaker. British Bulldog, Eddie Guerrero, Ric Flair, The Giant, the list goes on. So many people here, so many things to do. Who, Kyle, do you think is your wrestler of 1995? Keeping in mind it's September through December during the Monday Night Wars. Who's your wrestler of the year?
So it's a rough one between two, or actually almost three. I almost want to give Eddie Guerrero almost that, but once again, he hasn't really gone for
won
anything.
Any accolades yet? Yes, no.
Right.
I think he's definitely could be a sort of rookie of the year if that was a category, but he's also really not a rookie because he's wrestled elsewhere. But I agree, he should get a special note that we were thinking about you, Eddie, but you're not going to win this one.
You're not going to win it. Yeah, I feel like he just deserved a couple of nice words. Because I think they are booking him well.
Agreed.
As far as I think my two that I would have to fight between right now is Sting, and I know that maybe you're a little bit surprised that I say Sting, but he basically has won every match that we've ever seen him in. He's always looked good. He's cutting decent promos. He's on a roll, literally. He lost his U.S. title off television. It's like it never happened. So the one match where he did lose the title, and hell, he wasn't even bringing the title out when he had the title. So as far as I'm concerned, Sting is business as usual. He has not been squashed. He has not been defeated. He has been as strong as anybody on the card. But I guess if I really gotta say from the September to December, I mean, the only person that has given a bigger impact, no one has done a bigger impact to the sport, especially in Nitro and WCW, than the Giant. He's had a world title match where he was not defeated. I don't think he has been pinned yet. As far as I'm concerned, he has never lost a match. He has snapped the immortal Hulk Hogan's neck twice. He has survived falling off of a building. He shows up 10 minutes later to have a match that he ends up winning by DQ. He actually has a very high, I think a decently rated match with him and Macho Man towards the end of this year, where he legitimately beat Macho Man. No cheating, no nothing. He beat him in the middle of the ring, and Hogan had to come in with a steel chair to stop him. So right now, the Giant is on the biggest roll, and he is the biggest man. So obviously, his role is going to be the largest to roll on. So I will go with my vote is Paul White, a.k.a. the Giant.
Interesting choice. For me, Kyle, it's kind of a tough one because you look at someone like Undertaker, and it's like he was out half the time with a crushed face. He came back and won his matches, but he wasn't going for title matches. Now he's starting to, but ultimately you got to cross him off the list. British Bulldog, he wrestled in a couple high-profile matches, but he didn't win anything. So you got to cross him off the list. Razor Ramon, Intercontinental title. He's been on a pretty good streak. But I don't think he's Wrestler of the Year material by any means. That sort of leaves me with the Giant. You got Sting. I don't think I'd put Sting on the list. Yeah, he was on a roll, but he really hasn't won anything either. So that leaves me with Bret Hart, who is the current WWF champion. Won pretty much every match I think we've seen him in, but he's kind of been on and off television. You've got Hogan, who is there all the time on Nitro. You know, he's main eventing at pretty much every pay-per-view.
He's your standard bearer still, even if he's not he's not the champion, but he's your standard bearer.
He's right there. You already gave a great reason why the Giant should win it. For me, though, Kyle, I think I'm going to give Macho Man. And I say this because he won World War III, beat 59 other men, surprised us all to win that title. He's been kind of carrying the world title, wrestling, pretty much defending the world title on a weekly basis right now. Obviously, there's a lot of good storylines with him and Sting, him and Luger. He sort of was the paranoid thing. His story's been probably the most consistent since we started watching back in the Fall Brawl period of time, where he doesn't trust Luger. He's not sure about Sting. He's got this paranoid end of it. And even with like this, kind of broken arm, hurt arm, whatever the case is, the dude was world champion. Yeah, he just lost it at Starrcade to Ric Flair. But overall, I think I'm going to give it to Macho Man as a sort of surprise wrestler of, again, September through December.
Fair enough. I don't think you're going to sway me to say Macho Man. I still think the Giant has been the most impactful, and I would put that as that's what helps catapult him the rest of the year. You're kind of going towards the, as far as, kind of a surprise, like for what they had him do, and also the amount of workload he's been putting himself on while being legitimately injured. That I can't argue against that. I still think as far as immediate and just profound impact for the last 3 months total, I think the Giant squeaks by Macho Man, and I understand Macho Man has the gold, so that might be the tiebreaker, maybe in your eyes, because the Giant hasn't won the title, though he did walk around holding it. He had it around his waist. I still have to give it to the Giant.
Fair enough. So we've got a tie between Macho Man and the Giant, but let you fans out there decide. Are we right, one of those two, or do you get somebody else who's your wrestler of the year, or at least September through December? And that, Kyle, is going to be our show. I've got one more question as we start to wrap things up, Kyle, and that's ultimately what the show is about. We are reviewing the Monday Night Wars. It is Nitro. It is Raw. And I think it would only be fair, Kyle, if we closed out on one more thing. I don't think it even needs to be explained. But who's your Federation of the year? Does Nitro has Nitro won from September to December, or has Raw, Kyle?
I feel like outside of maybe a couple of dud shows, maybe, and once again, I think that's more of a poor booking thing on WCW's end. Their production value, their star power, and like I said, ultimately, I think the amount of money for just the overall, just the entertainment of the show has either been on par with Raw or has completely outclassed it at this point. So for me, from September to the end, Nitro has been a great breath of fresh air for professional wrestling. And it's, like I said, ultimately we know what happens at the end. It only makes both brands better that we know that we have true competition. So I give it to Nitro. I
agree. Nitro wins, and it kind of excites us both to see what 1996 has going for it. And that said, that's our show. That's our award show. If you guys disagreed, agreed, you want to let us know, go hit that subscribe button. Follow us on, leave us a review, Google Play, iTunes, we're there. Of course, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter. Follow us, like us, all that kind of stuff. Let us know who are your award winners. Keeping in mind, we did 95 just from during the period of the wars, from September through December. So let us know what you think. Go over to MondayNightTours.com for all of our old episodes. If you want to catch up, you haven't caught up. And then if you're getting ready, tomorrow we will be releasing our review of the January 1 editions of Raw and Nitro. Of course, Kyle, it's the Raw Bowl that we're going to get to talk about and discuss. So have a happy New Year. And for Kyle Hogan, I am Josh Kaiser, and we will see you guys next time on the Monday Night Tours.
Have a good New Year's Monday. See ya.